Aloha, everybody, and welcome to this episode of Faith and Family First. I'm your host, Eva Andrade. I am here with my co-host, Marcus Oshiro, and we're going to be talking about the list of bills that Governor Josh Green has just sent out, saying he is right on the cusp of vetoing. He did it early. What does that mean? Let's chat about that. Marcus.
Yay, Eva.
Are you excited about talking about the potential of vetoes?
I'm very excited. In fact, I brought the official scroll that I downloaded from the governor's website on the 19 bills that he is considering.
Here, let me hold one side for you.
Well, I can do it.
Let's see how long your arms can stretch.
It's 19 bills, and he says of the 320 bills that were passed, only 19 are on the potential veto list. He's already signed 200 bills into law, and that he's intending on signing or allowing to pass into law 101 more bills by July 9th. So we're going to focus on the 19 bills on the governor's veto list.
And what I love about the discussion is we can encourage people that between now and July 9th, the fact that the governor has sent this out to the legislature saying, this is my intent to veto, he's given his reasons why he has concerns about these bills, because really he's trying to give the legislature an opportunity to address some of his concerns.
And that's correct, because by law, by the Constitution, the legislature can go in on July 9th and on one day, in one session, at one hearing, one debate and discussion, make the changes to the bill to meet the governor's objections, and therefore avoid,
we should talk,
to override it.
We should talk about that, because I know that we do want to talk some of the bills that are on this list.
Yeah.
But so let's. So he is now given this list.
Yes.
And people can go see it at the Hawaii.gov/gov. It has all his press releases there. It'll have the entire list of all the bills that he's going to veto. And it's really cool because it says what his concerns are about those bills. So let's And
it's also a hyperlink, so you can click on to those bills and look at the bill itself, the committee reports, the conference committee reports, the testimony, and everything else from the legislative website.
I love this because everybody, let's give a little bit of a reminder that when a bill ends at the legislature that has been passed, there are three things that can happen to the bill. The governor can sign it and it can become law with his signature. He can let it become law without his signature.
Yes.
Or he can veto the bill.
Yes.
So the bills are not vetoed yet. It's just a notification that was sent out.
Yeah, this is like, hey, boys and girls, moms and dads, community, and legislators, these are my intentions, and these are why. So we can get into that.
Yeah, I think it's really good because we have a lot of different type of viewers. We have viewers that are very knowledgeable about this kind of stuff. And so they'll enjoy us talking about the bills. But we have some people that have like no clue what all this stuff means. So let's give a little bit of taste.
Okay. So to override the governor's vetoes, July 9th is the special date that has to occur when the legislature would then reconvene, come back into session. That's 76 legislators, 25 senators.
Two-thirds.
Okay? So you need two-thirds in both chambers. So that's 34 in the House, 17 in the Senate.
And can I brag for a second?
Yes.
Hawaii Family Forum was the organization that did the very first veto override in the state of Hawaii.
Hold on. We should hold that for a trivial pursuit because that's very important. That was the first.
It was the
first veto override, and I was in the legislature at that time.
Were. Yes, you were, and it had to do with the age of consent.
I was a majority leader at that time of the Democratic caucus,
Woo-hoo.
And the governor was.
The governor at that time was Cayetano, a Democratic governor, and it was a Democratic legislature that overturned a Democratic governor's veto.
You got it right. Okay, you got 5 points for that one there. Okay.
Well, we can't brag, as a small nonprofit that are always swimming upstream like salmon. We can only rejoice about certain things, but we remember this because our boss at the time, Kelly Rosati, which you knew very well, she worked overtime
She did.
on this issue. And it seems strange because Hawaii was the only state in the nation at the time that had age of consent at 14.
I believe that's right. I think even Mississippi, Louisiana,
Yeah.
Georgia, Tennessee,
What
North
does that
Carolina,
tell
South
you?
Carolina. Yeah. It was quite disturbing when we found out.
Oh, we did. So it's an exciting process
Yeah.
when you
Okay.
get the legislators on
Yeah.
board to override a veto.
Yeah. Okay. So there's 19 bills. I kind of broke them up into a couple of categories. So 5 of them are what I call fiscally related to the budget. So those are concerns that the governor probably has because of the fiscal implications of those bills. And that includes the budget itself. There's also public safety or law enforcement kind of bills, about 6 of them. And there's some bills dealing with housing issues or promotion of housing. And then another category I have is legislative add-ons or legislative specialties. And these are bills or proposals that I think interest certain sectors of the community or certain legislators or their constituents in certain areas. So
That's a good point.
Yeah.
So explain to people what's happening right now behind the scenes. So the legislators have now been made aware.
Yeah.
So what's happening at the state capitol now that they know that the governor has an intent to veto these bills?
okay, let me give it a good example because this has been brought to the public attention through the media. So this is House Bill 958 and House Bill 958 relating to transportation. That's basically a bill that was championed by one of the sophomore or junior legislators in the House, I think Representative Aquila from the West Side Waianae District. But he was trying to address the problems that we see, all communities see, with the use of electric bikes, motorized bikes, that are going through the streets, sidewalks, creating problems for pedestrians, also creating dangerous situations for the users themselves. So he put in a bill, that's House Bill 958, to deal with the regulation of that, what's prohibited, make the distinction between moped and motorcycles, and the different kind of categories and restrictions so that law enforcement, the Hawaii HPD, can enforce these laws.
Yeah, and my understanding is the governor wants to veto that particular bill because he's worried that it may unintentionally restrict electric cars.
That's correct. Yeah, so the electric cars, like, what's that guy's name?
Tesla. Are
Yeah.
you talking about the Teslas
Yeah.
that people are afraid to drive?
You think
out there
he's
in
doing
public
it
now?
because Tesla?
I'm not making any claims.
Toyota has their own too, Prius, right?
Oh yeah,
Ford has
a
them,
lot of
GM
have,
has
yeah.
them,
Nissan has theirs
Nissan
too.
has their,
or hybrids or
yeah,
whatever.
the hybrids too.
Yeah,
But the governor did say that could affect it, basically the way it's drafted. And I thought to myself, that's interesting because that language in the bill was repeatedly brought to a public hearing, reviewed by the Attorney General, by the Department of Transportation, all the experts in those fields, and yet you have that outcome here when the governor in early June has to say, I'm going to veto it because it could inadvertently affect electric vehicles.
Absolutely. And so now that this is also a good
yeah.
time to explain to people, does Hawaii have the ability for the governor to do line item vetoes?
Yes. So let's go look at House Bill 300. That's related to the state budget. And that's what the governor has already earmarked House Bill 300 for line item vetoes. So he can line item, which means he can scratch out with a pen a particular appropriation or expenditure in the budget and then, take that down. Or he can choose later on to allow it to be passed into law, but not release the monies.
Oh.
So a more direct public way of doing it is to strike it at this point in time and then ledger it as income or not a revenue loss or expenditure on his books for budget and finance accounting purposes.
So if the governor makes the changes and then the legislature agrees to them, is there any more process on the side of the legislature, or is there just an agreement and then it becomes law?
Yeah, it'll just go. The rest of the bill will pass into law except for those items that were struck by line item veto.
So there really isn't much the legislature can do right now except override.
Override. Yeah, it's all or nothing. It's either override or don't override. And override, you can go and fix it on July 9th in one day, in one session, fix the concern the governor has and approve a new bill.
So do you think that with the governor release, because he released it early, his list early,
Yeah.
do you think he released it early to give the legislature time to fix these things?
I think he did. I think he did. And I think he also wanted to make sure that everyone knew why he was doing it. And if there's any concerns, maybe his interpretation or the Attorney General's interpretation or somebody else's interpretation, maybe it's incorrect and he can be persuaded otherwise. So 19 bills on the veto list doesn't mean he has to veto all 19, but just, hey, heads up, boys and girls, I may veto it.
That's a good point, because just because he intends to veto him doesn't mean he will. So is there a chance that he could just sign it or let it become law without his signature?
Exactly. Okay, so earlier I mentioned that of the 320 bills, 200 have passed into law. So that's another 120 or so bills out there, right? Okay. So of that, 101 bills are not on the veto list, right? 19. So 101 bills are out there. The governor can sign off on those 101 bills or allow any of the 101 to pass into law without a signature. In fact, I was telling a friend of mine the other day, I said, well, it's good because your bill is not on the veto list. Congratulations. Hooray. Be happy. Throw a party, right?
Well, yes.
But I told them, if the governor doesn't sign it, it probably means he might be somewhat lukewarm.
So
indifferent to the bill.
I'm giving you a little segue now, because I know you did some research a couple weeks ago on Governor Burns. Now, the abortion law in Hawaii became law without his signature.
That's correct.
So what do you think was happening in the mind of Governor Burns at that time?
If
you remember your...
Well, I think the discussion back then was obviously as a devout, practicing, active Catholic who went to Mass every day. That's how he started his day. That grounded him. That led to the kind of leader that we love and respect even today. He made a choice that it would be futile to force the legislature into a special session to override a veto that he had laid down when he knew that the votes were overwhelmingly in favor of that policy. So that's what he did. He didn't want to irritate a lot of the people he had worked with, supported, encouraged.
Is this a no make waves thing, Marcus?
It's kind of like a no make waves. Like, it's like shikata ga nai. Shikata ga nai is like Japanese for like, hey, no can help. It's just it's how it is, right? So let it go, right? You know what I mean?
The French say, and I learned this in French high school. I took French for 4 years, and I had chacun ses goûts. To each his own. That's true.
Yeah. Okay, so getting back to this. So, yeah, there can be line item veto, but there's some interesting bills in here. There's a bill that I thought was interesting that you'd be interested in is relating to cannabis.
I knew you were going to bring that up.
No, the reason why I thought it was interesting because the governor says in his veto message here that he is concerned about medical privacy.
Yeah, the governor has made it clear he supports access to cannabis.
Oh, yeah.
Right? I mean, whether it's medical or even recreational, he's kind of going there. But he is citing some privacy concerns.
Yeah, which is interesting, again, because that issue was always inherent in this bill. That was part of the reasons why the Department of Health wanted to be able to examine, and see what the doctors or the advanced practice registered nurses or the so-called medical folks were giving these recommendations on, right? But here at the last minute, way after the legislature has signed a die, a month later, he comes up and says, hey, wait a minute. There are concerns about this, especially since it's still deemed illegal by the federal government under the federal law today.
We're gonna highlight this one and mark it because we may have to discuss that moving forward should Hawaii move into recreational cannabis territory.
And I thought this bill is also interesting because it's related to cannabis, but also in this bill there's a component that would allow the sale of hemp.
Yeah, hemp.
And I said, so I said to myself, it may run afoul of the one subject matter, one topic, prohibition that a bill can only have one subject matter, not two. In fact, there's a bill on this list that may be vetoed because of that very reason.
Wow, that's another one good to watch. And we should actually have Senator Gabbard on the show to talk about the difference between marijuana and hemp. even though they are very similar, and there are some ways that I do believe they run very, very, very closely together, intermingled maybe.
Calabash cousins.
Well, they're very close. Calabash cousins,
Close,
though.
very close.
In fact, I bet if we test their DNA, those cousins probably are related.
23andMe.
Yeah. Well, maybe not 23andMe right now with all the problems they're having.
Okay. So the bill that I was talking about was the Aloha Stadium and Convention Center bill. That they were trying to see if they could get naming rights to a corporation or a business to carry the name of Aloha Stadium or Hawaii Convention Center. But the concern that they raised here is that there's also a provision in that bill, Senate Bill 583, that does something regarding the procurement code and the procurement of services at those facilities.
And because, again, now we're back to the two subject, one bill, right?
Right.
Yep.
Right. There's also those tax credit bills, which is interesting because last time we talked about the change in the House Finance Committee with Representative Kyle Yamashita being taken out of the role as the finance chair and Representative Chris Todd from Hilo being replacing him. So a couple of bills that I know Representative Yamashita was pushing out and moving along was related to tax credits. And this one would sunset existing
tax. What bill number is that one, Marcus?
This is House Bill 796. This is a bill that would sunset existing tax credits as of January 31st, 2025. That 5 years from now they would be reduced and or repealed, in by 2030, and that was a concern.
And the governor is concerned that it's going to destabilize the film industry here in
Hawaii.
Film
industry, research tax credits, renewable energy tax credits, solar panels, batteries, etc. So he concerns about that. I think Representative Yamashita, I can kind of project myself into his shoes as a former finance chair, was looking at a periodic review of these tax credits, whether or not taxpayers in general are getting the best bang for their buck on giving these benefits to a particular industry or sector of industries, at the expense of all other taxpayers. Right?
And people are actually seeing a lot of news stories right now, people on their Facebook, their Twitter, their X's, talking about how the film industry is really suffering right now in Hawaii. In fact, there's nothing on the books. I saw an ad where they're saying that right now they're just not coming and filming here.
Well, I think that's occurring right now. But let's also keep in mind, and maybe I'm being keep in mind that we're also competing not only with the other 49 states, we're competing against the rest of the world. Mm-hmm. So there's other places you can go to get a tropical feel or vibe. You can go to Vietnam, New Zealand. You know what I mean? You can go to places in Mexico.
Hey, New Zealand put out Puerto Rico. Rings. Nobody can touch New Zealand.
So there's certain other locales that can offer maybe better tax credits even outside the country than we can within the competing against the rest of the states, or maybe like Canada, right? Canada gives a lot of great tax credits, right? Okay, so I think there was another one here. I thought was interesting. Oh, red light cameras. I think the local representative there may have wanted to have a red light camera on the North Shore. This is House Bill 235, and I believe the Department of Transportation came in and said, "Wait a minute." Good idea, but we have a system in place of measuring, assessing where and when we need to have a red light camera.
Yeah, he doesn't want there to be any competition with the Department of Transportation.
Well, yeah. So,
right, so he's kind of seeing that they're...
Yeah, so they're going to put a red light camera on the North Shore someplace. So I live in Wahiawa, so, but North Shore is, there might be some people, heavy...
Oh, heavy foots? Lead foots?
Yeah, Kakonahua, the winding road, and maybe going on Kamehameha Highway, getting home from Wahiawa and Haleiwa. Yeah. So that might be the concern there, but I think that's on the veto list. So we talked about electric bikes, that one there.
What did you think about the one, this is House Bill 126. This is the property forfeiture.
I thought that was very interesting because... I think the concern was that for certain people or defendants who have had their property attached for possible forfeiture, they wanted to get some certainty on when their property would be returned to them. Maybe 1 year, 365 days would be appropriate. let me know I can get my property back.
Right,
You know,
right.
because I got stuff inside there.
Right.
Right. I got things I got to deal with, my business or my possessions. Well, according to the governor's veto message, that that's not enough time. There's still investigation taking place. The prosecution may need to go and take evidence, take inventory,
Yeah.
tie things up. So 1 year would be too short in order to effectuate the purposes of law enforcement to seize any kind of asset for possible forfeiture.
And I can see actually both of those things
Yeah.
being a question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there might be a way of maybe looking at maybe a third party, maybe the courts can review at a certain point in time. What's the status of it? Where are we in the process of the prosecution and investigation? Maybe something like that. But that was top of the bill. Well,
So-
there's also a bill on mamaki tea.
Yeah.
Okay, it was just really interesting.
that one.
Mamaki
Yeah,
tea, because I
yeah.
just was thinking about planting some mamaki tea plants in my yard because it does very well in this area. But again, the prohibition there, the intent there was to protect the mamaki tea, 100% grown, processed in Hawaii.
Did we not have this conversation with Kona Coffee?
We did have Kona coffee many
Yes,
times. Okay,
yes,
okay, the blends,
yes.
the,
And because Kona Coffee needs to be Kona Coffee if they say it's Kona Coffee.
yes, yeah. That's why you have labeling today. It says 10% coffee, Arabica beans, or whatever, non-Kona coffee, right?
And
But-
what did I say at the Aloha Pregnancy Care and Counseling lunch? I said if Jesus came now, he wouldn't be turning water into wine. He'd be turning everything into Kona Coffee.
That's right. That's the golden fruit.
That is, man.
But this one, mamaki tea. So the concern that came up from some of the current producers is that they're already blending with different herbs and different other sources of maybe mamaki tea or different concoctions they're putting together for health reasons, right? So this might jeopardize existing businesses and where they are today on promoting mamaki tea Hawaii. So maybe they got to go back to the drawing board and
Because we want to protect our local farmers.
yeah. No, it's
Right?
it's the same like macadamia nuts, right?
Yes.
Macadamia nuts grown in Hawaii, grown and raised and processed in Hawaii versus macadamia nuts from Thailand, Australia, or South
Yeah,
Africa.
remember how good our pineapples used to be when Dole was doing all the pineapples?
Yeah, well, Dole and Del Monte, right?
In Del Monte.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
now what? We got to go California for pineapples.
California, or you got to go to Philippines, right?
So let's not have the mamaki tea or the macadamia nuts or the Kona coffee go elsewhere.
Well, we need to protect that, and I
Yes.
think that ties in also to trade. Mm-hmm. And don't get me talking about trade, especially with China, okay? RCP, okay? I can
Not
get
right
into-
now. Not
I can
right
get
now.
into that.
We
okay?
can't do that.
Yeah.
So I noticed one that had to do with pregnant individuals. Did you see the SB 104, the solitary confinement?
Yes, I
limit?
saw that.
This one would restrict solitary confinement for pregnant individuals or individuals under the age of 21.
Yeah, that's Senate Bill 104, right? Mm-hmm. Relating to corrections.
But the governor's concerns, and you may have your own note, was that the department's existing protocols make it redundant, and he's worried that it's going to weaken security.
Yeah, I think the concern that he raised is that this probably counters where they have been so far in working with the Hawaii Correctional Systems Oversight Commission. They have made recommendations. They have studied this issue in and outside of the legislative process. So that he wants to kind of like time out. Let's see how the current rules and regs are going forward until we go and add on another layer of legislation that could run counter to it or create more problems. So I think that's what he's suggesting here.
Yeah, so I think we need to watch that one. Well, we're watching all of them. Let's be fair about that. But
And there's another one, pilot program, Senate Bill 447, related to the Department of Health, trying to establish a way to get around some of the regulations, civil service rules, qualifications, standards, compensation for certain Department of Health personnel. And I think that deals with the issue of how do you go and recruit, retain employees in a very key area of health, Department of Health. And so maybe you can adjust the standards, the criteria, certain ratings. Mm-hmm. But again, the blowback from the human relations side is that it goes contrary to some of the civil service norms, rules, and some of the processes in place already for, civil service, selection.
and we got to do something about that because Hawaii does have a need for more mental health. Well, mental health too, but medical professions.
Yeah, we do. whatever barriers we have that we need to
Mm-hmm.
address them to recruit, retain the best and brightest in the area of healthcare, because
Mm-hmm.
that's one of the fastest growing areas and sectors in any economy, including the
Yep.
United States, is healthcare. It's one of the biggest areas.
Yep. What about the fire chief appointment one? That's Senate Bill
Yeah, I'm
1102.
not really sure about that, but I thought it may have done some changes to the appointment process, whether it goes through a confirmation process or allows the governor as a chief executive to go and appoint its administrator. I wasn't really sure.
Well, it said, well, it looked to me like the governor is cautioning that this is going to delay emergency operations.
Yeah, well, you don't want to do that.
No, and as a medical doctor,
Yeah.
and emergency room, so he probably
I think
has.
he's very sensitive to that.
Yeah.
And this is aircraft rescue firefighting,
Yeah.
right? So,
Yeah.
with the rash of incidents we've
Yeah.
been having at the different airports throughout the nation,
Yeah.
you want to make sure you got the top guy there and working now than later, right?
But I know, Jim Hochberg, when he was still here, I know that he was looking at this whole confirmation process. And he says Hawaii is we're just weird with the way we do things too, because we have bottlenecks. And not, well, yeah, it's just our whole process drives him nuts, which is why he says he moved to the free state of free state of Florida. I know that's a whole nother show, Marcus.
That is another. So there was several bills that under the housing category I thought was interesting. There were several bills that dealing with historic preservation that allow a private property of a home to be exempt from the inclusion of the Hawaii Register of Historic Places, and excluding a proposed project for existing residential property and proposed projects. The governor concerned that it would run around the review process of historic homes, and in fact maybe jeopardize even Iwi Kupuna.
The cultural sites, yeah.
Iwi Kupuna that could be on the property. Now, maybe we don't really think about that in Wahiawa or Mililani, but there are other communities that have been long established along the shoreline that there may in fact be Iwi Kupuna.
Yeah, recently, right? Where was it recently that they had to halt a whole project?
That's right. On Kauai, on Maui, you know what I mean? There's developments taking place there, and they're going to find Iwi next to the shoreline where developing residential homes or increasing their pilings to deal with global climate change, high wave action. But yeah, so he's going to veto that bill. I'm almost guarantee he's going to do.
Well, yeah, because when my review of that too looked like that he really felt that the way the bill was written was too overly broad.
Yeah, and there's another one similarly situated to say that procedures and requirements for single-family, multi-family housing projects to be expedited permitting process, to basically exempt from some of the requirements. Again,
which bill number is that?
This is Senate Bill 66 relating to housing, but it could run afoul of the historical preservation programs and undermine the protection of Iwi Kupuna and the regulatory scheme that protects Iwi Kupuna. Even in this area of developing housing, right? And everybody wants to develop housing. Yeah, that's given. But you got to also remember that you could inadvertently impact important, precious, rare Iwi Kupuna.
You remember Kahu Kurt Kekuna?
Yes.
I every time I used to see him, I go, "How's the Iwi?" He would get all stressed, because remember when he was Kahu.
Oh yeah,
he had a lot of issues with. This is something that we in Hawaii we
take
we
seriously.
We do have to take that
absolutely seriously.
I'm surprised you didn't talk about the HB 800. This is the one about Ali'i Place.
Oh yeah, that's an interesting bill because they wanted to actually transfer Ali'i Place to the state of Hawaii. Was it state of Hawaii? Oh, to the State Department of Land and Natural Resources.
Yes.
And also the Liliha Civic Center and Liha Fire Station from state agencies to the city and county. So
it's interesting because what the governor's questioning on this, what it looked like to me, is he's questioning the budget. Like, how did they come out to these numbers? And it just does not jive to him. He doesn't feel a study's been done.
Well, according to his rationale here, he's just saying, wait a minute, boys and girls, we don't even know what the cost is going to be to maintain the building Ali Place, right? It's been about like 20 something years. What's the cost to maintain it?
Because there wasn't a cost analysis done, or it's not provided.
No,
in the
you're
bill.
just kidding.
I know,
Wait,
Marcus.
it's
we're
just,
stretching.
you're
we're
right.
stretching.
They didn't do a cost benefit analysis here, according to the governor.
Yeah, according to him.
Well, I think then he might be in the right place to say timeout. Well, we consider that. And then also the city and county relies upon the lease rent income for their budgets, right?
So in this last minute that we have, what's the call to action? Is there a call to action?
Well, I think it is. If people are interested in these 19 bills here that are on the governor's veto list, to contact the governor ASAP and let him know that, hey, please don't veto it. And this is why. I think it's a good idea. We can fix it later on. It's not irreparable. The policy is a good policy. We just got to change a few things and maybe make the correction. Or also talk to this House and Senate leadership saying, I have a fix. I know how to fix it. Here's my proposal. You guys can fix it. Come in on July 9th. Fix it. Make it all good. Everybody be happy. Kumbaya.
That's right. That's a really good call to action. If you're one of those people that you're able to read these bills and maybe you see an answer to this, now's the time for you to contact your representative or your senator and say, hey, maybe this could work. Because in this negotiation between the Senate and House members and the governor, maybe you could drop a gold nugget in there that might make the difference. That's where your voice comes in. So make sure that you like this video, share, subscribe, hit that notification button so you know every time we upload a new video. And stay tuned because Marcus and I, we're going to continue to do things on this show that could shock you. It could make you laugh. It could make you freak out. It could make you rejoice. We don't know. Do you know, Marcus? Do you know what we're going to do?
I have no idea. Whenever I hang out with you, Eva, I have no idea
Yeah, help us help you. So make sure you comment below. Let us know if there's something that you'd like to hear from us. Comment, keep the conversation going. That's why we do what we do, because Jesus called us to do that. So,
Amen.
Amen. We'll see all of you next week. Mahalo, everybody.